Hello, dear friends. You're watching the Ruslan Belov channel, and this is your daily analytical briefing from the Ukrainian front. Today is a special day, May 9th, Victory Day, a day that for millions of people across the post-Soviet world remains far more than a date on a calendar. It is a living point of memory, of sacrifice, of resilience, of what a real victory actually costs. That is precisely why, despite an initial intention to take today off, this episode is going out anyway. News has come in from the front, news that would be wrong to stay silent about. Good news, important news, and as always, we'll break it down honestly, without unnecessary pathos and without glossing anything over. Before we get to the front, a brief note for those watching for the first time. This channel operates under YouTube's strict algorithmic policies. Military analytical content is systematically suppressed in reach, and the only thing that genuinely keeps us afloat is subscriptions and notifications. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, hit the bell. It takes literally a few seconds of your time and makes a real difference to the channel. Thank you to everyone already with us. Now let's get to work. Sloviansk direction, the capture of Kryvyi Luka, a strategic success. The main story of the past 24 hours, and arguably one of the most significant developments on this section of the front in recent weeks, is the establishment of Russian army control over the settlement of Kryvyi Luka on the Sloviansk direction. For those who follow the briefings regularly, this name has already come up in the context of tense anticipation. How quickly could the objective be achieved? And could it be achieved at all without descending into a prolonged positional grind? Let's unpack why this matters, because the word village on its own may not sound particularly dramatic. The key is the terrain. The Kryvyi Luka area is defined by continuous chalk ridges with elevation changes that create natural commanding positions. The AFU, Armed Forces of Ukraine, exploited this terrain with considerable skill. Fortified positions, built specifically around the local topography, deep shelters carved into the chalk rock, control over fields of fire from the high ground. The defense here was seriously constructed, not improvised trenches, but a deliberate, layered system. Military observers draw a direct parallel with Ryolixandrka, a settlement where fighting dragged on for several years and cost both sides significant casualties. Similar terrain, similar defensive doctrine, similar potential for a protracted standoff. That is precisely why well-founded concerns existed. The Kryvyi Luka area could become a new long-term stronghold. It did not. The active phase of fighting for the village itself took less than a week, a result that, given the preceding concerns, can fairly be described as rapid. The struggle for the surrounding heights took just over a month. The outcome, both the village and the commanding high ground, are now under Russian army control. This fundamentally changes the tactical picture on this section of the front. What are the prospects from here? The next step is to press the heights to the west of already held positions. After that, Costantinovka becomes the next objective. Once it falls, fighting will follow for the elevated terrain in the Kostiantynivka area. When all of these tasks are completed, Russian forces will hold control over the key heights of the Sloviansk section as a whole, opening new operational space for further action on this axis. Clash with Colombians, 16 eliminated, some captured. Running parallel to the Sloviansk developments, another story arrived that deserves separate attention. Russian army units engaged a large group of Colombian mercenaries in combat. The group numbered more than 40 fighters, a substantial force even by the standards of mercenary formations. The result, 16 killed, a number taken prisoner, the remainder retreated. Footage from the engagement has already appeared in open sources. The presence of foreign mercenaries on the Ukrainian theater is not news in itself, but every documented episode like this adds another brushstroke to the broader picture. The combat effectiveness of such formations varies enormously. Some are veterans with genuine operational experience. Others are plainly undertrained fighters attracted by financial promises. In this case, the outcome speaks for itself. Sloviansk direction, advance near Ryolixandrka. The second significant episode on the Sloviansk direction was an advance on the southern approaches to Ryolixandrka. Russian units operating from Fedorivka Druha established control over the small settlement of Dibrova. tightening the encirclement of Ryolixandrka from the south. Pressure on this node is now becoming multi-directional. That said, it is necessary to honestly record the pace of advance directly on Ryolixandrka has objectively slowed. This is not a surprise, and not grounds for alarm. Ryolixandrka is the last major fortified area before Mykolaiv, just a few kilometers from the city. The AFU understand the significance of this position perfectly well, and are defending it with maximum tenacity. Stopping the Russian army has proved beyond them. But buying time is a task that Ukrainian command clearly considers achievable. For now, they are managing it. Kostiantynivka direction, flanking pressure and airstrikes. Significant events have also unfolded on the Kostiantynivka section. And the most important news came not from the city itself, but from the right flank. It was there that units of the southern group of forces conducted a productive advance. Moving out from Novodmitrivka, Russian forces reached the reservoir and then entered the village of Molokaka, consolidating on its eastern portion. The encirclement of Kostiantynivka from the right flank becomes appreciably tighter. There is a second critical element. The distance from the newly held positions to the Druzhkivka-Kostiantynivka highway is now less than 5 kilometers. That road is already a death corridor for the AFU. The number of destroyed vehicles on it is counted not in dozens, but in hundreds. Closing the distance further makes logistics along that route even more precarious. The one factor that raises legitimate concern is the section to the north. While it remains unresolved, it is premature to speak of airtight control over the city's perimeter. The AFU retain a fortified position there that Russian forces have so far been unable to crack. Nevertheless, the overall dynamics on the Kostiantynivka direction are positive. Russian aviation has already begun employing FAB series glide bombs against AFU fortified positions within the city boundaries, a characteristic signal that preparation for the final phase of the assault is underway. Based on expert assessments, if the current dynamic holds, the city will in all likelihood pass under Russian army control before the end of summer. Novoandroneka direction, entry into Vasilivka. Another local but meaningful advance on the Novoandroneka direction. From Ryolixandrka, Russian units pushed approximately 2 kilometers and entered Vasilivka, consolidating on the settlement's eastern outskirts. Fighting for the village continues. The outcome remains open, but the initiative on this section clearly rests with the Russian side. Zaparisia direction. The Oric node and pressure on the AFU. On the Dnipropetrovsk-Zaparisia direction, the picture is coming into increasingly clear focus. AFU attacks in the Stepnohursk-Primorsk area are gradually subsiding. At the same time, Ukrainian command has begun an emergency redeployment of reserves toward Oric, a telling signal that the situation there is being assessed as threatening. The Russian army has effectively blockaded Huliaipolske and is steadily advancing toward Volshebne. The fall of Huliaipolske, combined with successes in the Upper Tersa and Vzdvijenka areas, will free Russian forces to move toward Novosilki, where consolidation on the outskirts is already reportedly underway. The flanking movement around Oric continues. The AFU's position at Novopavlivka is also deteriorating. The greater part of the settlement is already under Russian forces' control. Vilia direction, the wedge drives deeper. On the Vilia direction, Russian forces continue to methodically drive an operational wedge in the Hrishin area, already pushing northwest of the settlement. Novoalexandrivka has been taken. Fighting for Vasilivka is ongoing. Ukrainian military channels are beginning to report the start of engagements for Marin, the next settlement along the river valley. The wedge is being driven progressively deeper, threatening to split the AFU's positions on this section into two isolated sectors. Meanwhile, to the west of Rodinska, in Belitska, and in the Novodonbass area, the Ukrainian side is putting up determined resistance. Any notion of ceasefire observance on these sections simply does not apply. Daily summary. Taking stock of the past 24 hours, 2 settlements and approximately 11 square kilometers of territory passed under Russian army control. For context, 2 days ago, 56 square kilometers were captured, but not a single settlement changed hands. Yesterday delivered less territory by area, but 2 concrete populated objectives. Both pictures are part of a single offensive movement. May overall is demonstrating a significantly higher tempo than April. The announced three-day ceasefire, from May 9th through the 11th, means a pause in active operations. But it is a pause, not a stop. Strait of Hormuz and the US-Iran standoff. The Strait of Hormuz is once again at the center of global attention. During the night, American and Iranian warships engaged in a brief but intense combat encounter. According to CBS News, the confrontation was fierce enough that American sailors were forced to use handheld firearms in close-quarters combat. NASA satellite imagery has captured a chain of fires in the engagement area, with a further large blaze visible approximately 30 kilometers west of the Iranian island of Larak. Separately, Iran seized an oil tanker sailing under a Barbados flag, with Tehran claiming the vessel had been attempting to obstruct Iranian oil exports. As reported by the Tasnim news agency, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio responded with characteristic bluntness. If they threaten Americans, they will be blown up. As stated by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he also clarified that Washington's response to the shelling of American destroyers is a separate track from Operation Midnight Hammer, the offensive campaign targeting Iranian missile systems, naval forces, and military production facilities. Rubio further warned that allowing Iran to normalize its control over the strait would set a dangerous global precedent for freedom of navigation. According to U.S. intelligence, Iran can sustain the current pressure for at least another 3 to 4 months, a deeply inconvenient figure for an administration visibly running short on patience. America's allies are watching with growing anxiety. An escalation would make them potential targets for Iranian retaliation. Ukraine negotiations. Washington signals it may walk away. Secretary of State Marco Rubio raised the possibility of the United States withdrawing from the Ukraine negotiating process entirely. His words were notably candid. We do not want to waste our time and invest energy and effort into endeavors that are not generating progress. As stated by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the American administration is openly acknowledging a dead end, and Washington appears to have concluded that the problem does not lie on the Russian side of the table. The table, it bears repeating, is three-sided: Russia, the United States, and, on the third side, the European Union together with Ukraine. It is precisely that third party that has been consistently blocking any meaningful progress toward a settlement. Europe-Russia, the sanctions war, and its cost. EU High Representative Kaja Kallas reaffirmed this week that the bloc will not lift sanctions without a Russian troop withdrawal. Peace without justice is not peace, it is capitulation, as stated by EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs Kaja Kallas. The resolve is declared. The economic cost, however, keeps climbing. The Hormuz disruption and energy market instability hit Europe far harder than the United States. Industrial lobby groups in Germany, France, and Italy are signaling to their governments that the costs of the sanctions policy are approaching unsustainable levels. Russia, meanwhile, continues to redirect export flows eastward and maintain military production. The collapse Brussels anticipated in 2022 is not happening. Russia officially confirmed agreement to Trump's ceasefire initiative covering May 9th through the 11th, including a prisoner exchange, as announced by presidential foreign policy aide Yuri Ushakov. Whether it holds on the ground is, as frontline reporting makes clear, an entirely different question. Analytical summary. The overall picture for the day is multi-layered. On the Ukrainian front, solid tactical results and sustained offensive momentum. May is objectively outpacing April. The Strait of Hormuz, escalating military turbulence with visible signs of American fatigue. The negotiating track on Ukraine. Washington is publicly signaling it may exit the process, effectively freezing diplomacy. Europe, trapped between reputational costs that make retreat impossible and economic costs that make continuation increasingly painful. In this situation, the advantage belongs to whoever can sustain tempo, on the battlefield and in the economy alike. We will be watching developments closely. Subscribe to the channel and enable notifications. In conditions of YouTube's algorithmic restrictions, it is the only reliable way to ensure you don't miss the next episode. Peace and goodwill to all. Take care of yourselves and stay well. Until next time.